Chapter 13.
Delling City.
The grand station that connected Galbadia Garden to Delling City was a popular spot for Galbadia Garden students. There was no oversight here by faculty and staff, so they could relax and be more like normal students. Walking through them, Squall was rolling his shoulder. They had run into another Wendigo that, luckily, was by himself. Fighting him without Rinoa's gravity powers had been difficult, and he thought he had strained his shoulder ducking out of its grasp. Zell was stretching as Quistis took a prim seat on a bench while Squall went off to buy tickets. When he came back, Zell had managed to find a food stand. They split up some food and ate there as they waited for the others to arrive. It took a few hours. They were moving slower. Eventually, right before the train was about to leave, they finally caught up. Selphie was still mooning over Irvine, who appeared to be enjoying her attention. Rinoa was no longer holding his arm. She was walking just a little ahead of them and, upon catching sight of Squall and the others, she increased her speed slightly.
"How was the trip?"
Zell asked, grinning at her face.
"I regret everything,"
she said, passing by him quickly, putting space between herself and Irvine's wandering hands. Squall held up her ticket and she took it gratefully.
"Let's just get inside,"
Squall said, trying not to think of why he was pleased that she wasn't as enamored with Irvine now after a few hours traveling with him. Squall went in the train first. His eyes moved immediately to the ticket receptor. Rinoa and the others filed in behind him as he moved towards it. Selphie was skipping aboard as the machine accepted the ticket and dinged, unlocking the door for him. Selphie was grinning as she stepped in close.
"You caught on."
Laughing, she raced forward into the compartment, where the big window would be. Irvine walked onto the train as she disappeared. His eyes remained on her, a strange look coming over them as the intercom announced the imminent departure of the train.
"It's not that far to Delling City by train,"
Squall said.
"There's really no need to try to find a compartment."
This train wouldn't have the private seed car that the one going to Balam possessed anyway. Rinoa looked a little uncomfortable as the train's engine rumbled and the locomotive began pulling away from the station. She sighed.
"Delling City, hey?"
Squall raised an eyebrow at the behavior. He didn't get to ask. Irvine grinned, murmuring under his breath.
"Perhaps it's fate."
Squall turned to watch as he walked through the door towards where Selphie was staring out of the large window. It shut behind him before they could see him reach her.
"So, what do we do about him?"
Zell asked, making a face.
"I don't really like the fact that Headmaster Sid sent us on a mission with someone who isn't Seed." "It is odd,"
Quistis agreed, crossing her arms over her stomach.
"We have plenty of sniper-trained Seeds. Why couldn't he have sent one with the message?"
Rinoa looked between them, feeling suddenly very out of place. At least Irvine was designated to be here with them. She wasn't Seed either, and she had just forced them to accept her. Neither Quistis or Zell brought it up though.
"Hey, Rinoa."
Zell's call pulled her from her thoughts.
Yes." "What was he like? On the road?"
She shrugged.
"I don't really know how to say it properly." "She means politely,"
Quistis grinned as Squall looked at her with a hand on his hip. Rinoa scratched her head, just behind her ear, awkwardly.
"He kind of just kept flirting with us. I've never heard so many compliments in my life. He just kept going with them. Kind of made them all seem disingenuous. And he kept grabbing. I didn't really appreciate that.
Squall frowned at her, his eyebrows furrowing, but Zell looked uncomfortable.
No. I meant like, how was he as a fighter? Oh.
Rinoa's face went red.
I don't know, actually. We didn't fight anything. I guess you guys must have gotten all the monsters between here and there.
A sound from the front of the train had them turning. Before anyone could ask him to, Squall was already walking forward following after Irvine. Selfie was at the window, as she usually was. She wasn't really looking outside though. She was staring down at her hands, her face bright red, as Irvine stood beside her, fawning over her.
Selfie!
He moaned out like a lover.
We're destined to be together. Why yeah, right.
She laughed nervously. She let out a long breath, trying to control her heart.
A sigh of love?
He asked, grinning at her, leaning in close.
And no.
She turned to him quickly, her face even brighter red. She was so much shorter than Irvine, so tiny, that it seemed like he was bullying her somehow. Irvine grinned at the look on her face. He winked and leaned back. Then, turning, he caught sight of Squall. His grin changed, became just a little bit cocky as he stepped forward.
Pardon me,
he grinned. Though the polite thing to say, it sounded so rude somehow. Squall stepped aside and let him walk out of the car and back towards the others. As the door shut behind him, Squall turned and looked over to Selfie. She was breathing just a little hard, her hand on her heart, her eyes downcast.
My heart's beating so fast,
she said, mostly to herself.
What is this I'm feeling? It's an important mission,
Squall said for lack of anything else that might be more helpful.
Better get used to the pressure.
Selfie nodded. He knew very well that wasn't what she was freaking out about, but he would really rather not deal with the other issue. She seemed to accept his words anyway. Slowly, she returned to the window and began singing her train song again. Another sound from the previous compartment had Squall returning. His feet moved faster this time and he wasn't at all surprised at what he saw.
Rinoa!
Irvine moaned like a lover. Obviously uncomfortable, Rinoa escaped from his gaze and ran to the other end of the car. Squall's eyes narrowed on Irvine, but it wasn't him that snapped.
Irvine Kinias!
Quistis stomped, her angry instructor voice in full force.
You're playing a major role in this mission. Now behave yourself.
Zell was rolling his eyes as Rinoa hid behind him.
This is why I don't like non-seeds on our missions. No respect. Hey, Squall. You want me to teach this guy some seed manners?
Irvine tisked at them, making a face as he turned away. That joking face of his was so abruptly gone that it was almost confusing.
No one understands me,
he said, like he might be disgusted with them.
Sharpshooters are loners by nature.
Then why the obsession with the girls? Squall's eyebrow raised at him.
We hone our instincts,
Irvine continued, pulling his hat low over his eyes.
Pour our whole being into a single bullet.
As if to illustrate, he slammed his fist into his hand. The smack of his leather gloves echoed loudly in the otherwise silent cabin.
The pressure of the moment. An instant of tension. That's what I have to face alone,
Irvine said to them, tossing his hair back. Squall rather missed the playboy persona to these dramatics.
It's not easy. So, just do me a favor and let me be. You get my drift.
In other words, allow him to do whatever he needed to relax so he could bear that moment of tension later. Translation: just let him mess with the girls. Zell looked his Squall, his fist shaking as he resisted the urge to punch Irvine. Irvine wasn't Seed though. Squall had no power over him. He could threaten and cajole all he wanted, but Irvine was going to do as he pleased anyway. Considering his attitude towards his own headmaster, he didn't think he was particularly concerned with punishments for his actions. Squall just shook his head. They would just need to deal with it. For now. Zell growled and let out a cry of annoyance. He couldn't contain his own anger. He slammed his fist down against the train floor. Everyone stumbled a bit as the force of it shook the entire train. There was now a large dent in the metal floor where Zell's fist had landed. It only took a second before the intercom was switched on and the nervous conductor called out.
There was no damage to the train from that, minor vibration. Repeat. There was no damage to the train from that minor vibration.
Squall shook his head at Zell. He was really going to have to work on his temper. And while Squall had no power over Irvine, he certainly had it over Zell. It was nightfall by the time that the train pulled into the central station at Delling City. The hissing of the tired train as they stepped from the inner compartment echoed in the large hall amongst the other, similar trains.
The train to the D District Prison is leaving from Platform 3,
a robotic voice was saying over their heads as they moved towards the escalators up into the city.
Never been here before,
Zell said, looking around with his hands behind his head.
It's full of the best women,
Irving told him, grinning with his hands in his pockets. Zell glared like he was angry Irving had chosen to walk beside him. At hearing him speak, Rinoa stepped just a bit closer to Squall. She was looking over her shoulder uncomfortably at Irving. Squall was ignoring them. He was using his inventory to absorb his weapon. He didn't want to have it out walking through Delling City. While he had made sure not to look at the camera in the Timber TV studio, he didn't want to risk anyone recognizing him or seeing him as a threat. Better to put it away while in the city. There was no problem here his fists couldn't solve anyway. He and Rinoa stepped onto the escalator first. The others were just behind him. They rode up slowly as the laughter of kids playing on the steps on the opposite side washed over them. Squall heard the others make an odd sound as they reached the top. Delling City was clearly preparing for something. There were large balloons and lights in the sky. There was a lively energy here even though it was past nightfall. It looked like there was some large, citywide party going on around them.
What's with this?
Selfie asked, laughing delightedly.
It's like a festival. Are they preparing for something or it always like this?
Quistis asked.
We're going to Caraway's mansion, right?
Rinoa asked, oddly calm. Squall expected her to be as excited as Selfie at the city.
Just take bus 8.
She pointed not very far where a bus stop was right there for those taking trains. A ticket seller was standing there. Tickets were only a single gil and they all purchased one then stood back to wait for the bus to arrive.
The mansion is on the other side of the city,
Rinoa said, tucking her ticket away.
And the city can be a little confusing sometimes. The bus is just faster. Sounds like you know this place pretty well,
Zell smiled. Rinoa didn't answer him. She was looking away, still standing rather close to Squall. He didn't really care. He was curious, but, honestly, his mind was elsewhere. This was where Laguna was from. It looked slightly different from how he remembered it in the dream, but it was still Deling City. He wondered if, even right now, Laguna was being held in a hospital somewhere after that fall down the cliff. Or maybe he was already. If he even really existed. Squall had to remember he still was just a dream. There could even be some magic at work here he didn't know about. Could even be fairies. The thought of Laguna's ridiculous idea had him grinning wryly at his inner joke. Beside him, Rinoa blinked at the sudden smile. Quistis and Selfie were talking about the city, Irving was winking at a passing girl, and Zell was growling at Irvine. No one was saying anything funny. So what was he smiling at? He was lost in his own thoughts. That distant look in his eyes that seemed so dismissive when staring at someone was on his face. His thinking face, she realized. He was thinking something. He always seemed to be thinking something. If she asked, would he share those thoughts with her? Squall noticed her staring and his eyes focused on her.
What?
She shook her head.
Nothing.
No. He wouldn't share. He never shared his thoughts. He thought of something funny, but he didn't want to share it. No, that wasn't right. It wasn't that he didn't want to. He just didn't. He was making no effort to get any closer to any of his friends. Jokes, stories, kindness. He was doing his best to stay aloof. And, whenever she got too close, he would do something to make her mad and push her away again. Was he doing this on purpose? Why would he?
What?
Squall asked again as she kept staring, his brows furrowing in annoyance. She smiled brightly.
Nothing.
Squall looked at her, confused at the sudden change in her expression. Was she laughing at him? The bus pulled up to the terminal and they climbed aboard. Buses ran all through Deling City, allowing the citizens to get anywhere they needed to go quickly. Open to the outside, they weren't really meant to be used for long periods. They were efficient though. Squall and the others sat near the back, away from everyone else. They were ignored as those riding the bus were absorbed in whatever they were doing. They didn't care about the teenagers. The buses also offered a nice view of the city as they passed through. The lack of windows didn't deter Selfie at all from leaning against the edge and staring out. The wind threw her hair about as she leaned out over the side. Doing so pushed her hind end out as a sight for Irvine to ogle to his heart's content. Zell growled at him, Irvine smirked back. Quistis sighed. Squall ignored it all as he watched the buildings pass by. Rinoa had chosen to sit next to him and he was pretending he wasn't noticing her staring again. It didn't necessarily bother him that she stared, but he would dearly like to know what was going on in her head as she did so. Just what did she find so fascinating?
Rinoa, do you know the stop we need to get off at?
Quistis asked her.
Oh, yeah. It's not going to take too long. Been to Deling City often?
Selfie asked, finally turning from the view.
I'm familiar with the area,
Rinoa said, not really answering the question. She leaned back against the seat, frowning around her. Squall took the opportunity. She wasn't staring to watch her in turn. The days out under the sun, fighting and hiking, though relatively short, had already left their mark on her body. Her skin, so pale before, had really livened up with a sun-kissed tan. Her black hair seemed somehow darker, while the highlights in her bangs popped out all the more. It was too early to be building muscle, but she moved as though sore. No scars yet marked her body, from which Squall took satisfaction. However, her skin already had lost its overly glossy look after bearing the elements for so many days and nights. He liked the change. It made her look more natural. More alive. Less like she belonged on a pedestal and more like she could fit into his arms. Rinoa's eyes lifted and she caught him looking at her.
What?
He gave her a wry grin before turning away.
Nothing.
Rinoa chuckled. She actually chuckled at his joke. Which was probably a first. She had understood he was mimicking her and found it funny. No one ever laughed appropriately with him before. He rather liked the warm feeling that came from having a joke laughed at. As promised, the trip to Caraway's mansion didn't take long by bus. They disembarked and looked up at the multi-story house set on a wide lawn behind a tall, stone wall. There was a gate, but it was wide open at the moment. There was, however, a single Galbadian soldier guarding it. Which Squall found laughable. What would a single guard be able to do? As the others climbed down after him, he looked over the windows. They were all drawn, hiding whatever was inside. A smart decision for someone who might have reason to fear snipers. Unlike the lower ranks of his military, General Caraway wasn't a useless buffoon. He had been at his job for almost 20 years now and he was responsible for the annexing of timber. He was a smart, tactically based man. Squall didn't understand why he would suddenly be seeking to oppose the order of his president so flagrantly. Was it a coup d'état? Was he seeking more power for himself? No, that didn't seem right. If that were the case, why not hire them to kill the president himself? It wasn't like they would have qualms about doing so. They were mercenaries. If he wanted the president's position, this was the most backwards way to go about trying to get it. No, more likely, General Caraway was as afraid of the sorceress as the garden headmaster was. If she came to power, he would no doubt become her puppet. All the freedoms he likely enjoyed as general would be gone in the face of her power.
Shall we?
Irving asked, gesturing towards the guard as the bus pulled away. As he was leader, though he couldn't imagine why, Squall stepped forward first. He nodded to the guard formally.
We're here from Galbadia Garden to see General Caraway. Well, you've come to the right place then,
the guard grinned at them sarcastically.
General Caraway's mansion is right through this gate. Too bad I can't just let you walk in.
What was with this guy's attitude? Whatever.
I believe he's been informed of our arrival,
Squall said, crossing his arms.
Yes, indeed,
the soldier laughed at them, mimicking Squall's posture. Rinoa wondered if he would be as carefree if he knew that Squall could kill him with one hand.
However, I was ordered not to let you through until your skills have been tested. What the hell's he talking about?
Zell asked, glaring. Great.
Test our skills? What does he want us to do?
The guard grinned at the question.
A ways north of here, set at the end of a long peninsula, you'll find the old ruins that is the tomb of the unknown king. All you have to do is get there. Real simple. But, you have to bring back proof you were there. A code number. A code number. We came all the way out here for this.
Zell snapped, rolling his eyes.
Who does he think we are? Who do you think you are?
The guard returned, sneering.
How do I even know that you're the ones he's waiting for? You could be regular Galbadia Garden students trying to see him. Which happens often. They all want to call on him to hope to advance themselves in the army later. If you are who you say you are, then this will be easy for you.
He wasn't wrong. And Squall couldn't very well tell him no.
Fine. What code number?
He asked as Quistis reached out to calm Zell down.
There was a student from Galbadia Garden here yesterday, in fact, who has yet to return from the test at the tomb of the unknown king. Your objective is to go to the tomb, look for traces of this lost student, and return with his ID number. Of course, I don't recommend going in any further than you have to. You may never make it back alive. Here. A map for you. It's a rough sketch of the inside of the tomb. There's no real landmarks once you get inside, so don't discount the map. I've heard it's a rather small place, but it's very easy to get lost inside. Not to mention, there's some powerfully defensive monsters living in the walls. The kind of stuff that likes the dark and cramped spaces. I wouldn't recommend fighting them. Got it?
Got it, Squall said, tucking the map into his jacket.
I also have information, if you're interested. But, nothing comes free in this world.
The guard showed his palm, rubbing his fingers together.
If you know what I mean.
Squall shared a look with Quistis. She shrugged. Whatever.
What are you doing?
Rinoa asked as Squall pulled out his PDA. With a press of a few buttons, he had transferred 3,000 gil to the guard.
How kind of you,
the guard grinned at his bank account on his communicator.
It's well known that there's a GF that's taken up residence inside that tomb. If you're as good as you think you are, I see no reason you can't go for it. It might be worth your time. I hear that the GF is a real mover and shaker. However, you'll need to get deep inside the tomb to find it. I've heard that anyone who went looking for it either never returned, or returned beaten nearly to death. One man said he found the GF, but he lost it again and couldn't find it a second time. Maybe it's skittish.
The guard laughed at them.
I also know a hint for defeating it from that man, if you're interested.
Squall handed over a second payment, ignoring the way Rinoa grabbed the arm of his jacket. She glared daggers at the guard, but he didn't seem to care.
You're so generous,
the guard snickered.
The man was rather, let's say, annoying. He did say, however, that the monster had a weakness. He said to defeat it, he had to stay above ground. So, there you go. Stay above ground. Hope it was worth the price.
The guard was laughing at them more genuinely now. Rinoa and Zell were both growling at his attitude, but Squall didn't seem bothered. And as he was the leader, neither of them were going to speak over him. Squall put away his PDA, looking at the man with that cold, unaffected gaze of his. Rinoa had never been such a fan of it as she was at this moment.
That's helpful information,
he said, stopping the guard's laugh.
Hope it was worth the change. Change?
The guard repeated, confused. Squall shrugged.
I know how much Galbadian soldiers make. I feel like I'm giving to charity. Don't spend all that gil in one place.
Rinoa was snickering as Squall turned and began walking them away. Her laughter was just as much an insult as Squall's words, and she could feel the guards' glare on their back.
What an ass,
Zell grumbled as they walked down the street.
Seriously,
Selphie sighed.
It's so unprofessional. If the Galbadian government paid their soldiers a more suitable wage, that sort of thing wouldn't happen,
Quistis said wisely.
It's hardly his fault. That was a nice burn though,
Irvine grinned at Squall's back.
Seriously though, how much did that 6,000 set you back?
Squall looked confused at the question.
Exactly 6,000.
Irvine made a face as Rinoa giggled.
No, I mean how much did it hurt? Not at all. I don't really care about the money. Oh, you're one of those.
One of those what? What was he not getting here?
It's not really a big deal. That guard probably only makes that much in a month. Wait,
Irvine frowned.
How much do you make in a month? I don't know. I haven't been working for a full month yet. I've only gotten a few paychecks. A few.
Irvine was taken aback.
You can just multiply them together to get a general idea,
Zell said helpfully.
Instructor, you're good at math, right? What's the standard seed rank 10 pay in a month? You're rank 10, Squall.
Quistis asked, smiling at him as though proud.
No, not anymore. That's what's making it hard to calculate. I've gone up in ranks since then. It's not as easy as just multiplying the two numbers together any longer. Wait, you were already promoted?
Zell frowned.
So was I,
Selphie beamed.
What?
He looked between them.
That's just not right. Okay, okay.
Irvine cut them off.
I get it. Sorry I asked.
Dem seeds. Rinoa was laughing again. She was standing a little close to him as they walked down through the streets of Deling City. The others stayed behind the two of them. Squall honestly expected her to go stand with them as they were more friendly and talkative. She didn't seem inclined to move from his silent side though.
Do you know if there's a junk shop around here?
Squall asked her.
Yeah.
Rinoa thought for a second.
I think it's just down the street from the hotel. I know how to get there. You do? I was here as Laguna at one point. That's really the only place he went. This way, right? Yeah.
Rinoa frowned as he picked the correct turn without needing to be helped. Those dreams of his and the others were kind of scary. What did they even mean? She knew that Squall didn't want to talk about them, but she couldn't help but be curious. It was just such a strange and confusing thing. And it showed him the layout of a city he had never been to before. So did that mean it was reality? The Deling City junk shop smelled of grease, hot metal, and gunpowder. It was like perfume. Squall took a deep breath of it as he came inside. That was a smell he enjoyed. It almost made him feel like he was at home. The old man working on an impossibly large sword looked up as they came inside. He grinned at the sight of them and lowered his tools.
Welcome. The 6 of you looking to buy weapons? No. Looking to upgrade them.
Squall stepped forward and pulled his gun blade from his inventory. It thudded loudly as he set it down on the counter. Rinoa grinned to see the old man's eyes go wide at the sight of it.
Now, that's a fine gun blade you got there, lad.
The others were laughing and spreading out behind him, taking a peek at the wares offered. There were a great many pictures forming a portfolio of the man's previous work. Quistis was thumbing through a book that detailed full weapons for sale. Selphie somehow had already gotten her hands on one of the weapons inside a case and was holding the staff in her hands curiously. Irvine was over by the ammo, Zell was looking at leather selections. Rinoa realized that this was the seed version of a day at the mall.
How long would it take to upgrade the gun?
Squall said, pointing to it.
The ammo I'm using currently isn't armor piercing. And you need the power to make it so. Well, you've come to the right place. That's a while you wait kind of upgrade. Shouldn't take too long. This is a fine weapon. You've maintained it well. The construction cost is set already, so all you need to do is pick out the materials. I have the materials. What do you need?
Rinoa watched as the two of them haggled over what was needed to upgrade the gun. Squall started pulling things from his inventory and placing them before the man. It was mostly only metal pieces, but the metal was of a superior quality to what the old man had in the shop.
Nice having your custom,
the old man grinned, gathering the gun and supplies.
Hey! Benaro! Got a gun blade for you. Fix it quick.
The old man gave the blade to a man behind a small window in the back before turning with a smile in place once more.
Should be ready soon. Excuse me.
Quistis got his attention, smiling at him. She pointed to the book.
How much for this whip here? The slaying tail? Ah, that's a fine one. Very fast. Sharp spike there at the end provides some kick. For you, gorgeous, I'll knock off 10%. 200 gil and a pretty smile for an old man.
Quistis obliged with the smile immediately, adding in a giggle at his charm.
I'll take it. Do you do trade-ins? I won't need my chain whip. Yeah, hold on. Hey! Zanero! Get me a slaying tail from stock.
As Quistis and the man haggled over the price for trading in the chain whip, Squall turned to Rinoa and held out his hand.
Give me your blaster. Hey! Why? Why do you think?
He raised an eyebrow.
Oh, we don't need to upgrade mine. I don't have anything to upgrade it with. It's fine. Hand it over. You don't know what fine means,
Rinoa grumbled, but she detached the weapon from her arm. She felt suddenly naked without it. Which was strange as she used to go without it all the time. She was spending too much time around the seeds.
Hey, old man,
Irvine came over, holding an armful of ammo.
I want this. And I want that anti-recoil special on my Valiant. You sure? That really detracts from a gun's looks. Makes it kind of ugly. Please,
Irvine grinned.
I'm pretty enough to make up for it. What do you need?
A few minutes later, the old man was handing the hidden Benaro the gun for upgrades. Irvine was spending a great deal of money buying ammo, and Selfie was crying out in delight because she had found the nunchakus. And one of them came equipped with 2 spiked maces at the end of the blue wood body. Selfie was almost drooling.
Mister! This one here. Right here. Can I have it? Hey!
The old man blinked at what she was looking at.
That one? No offense, miss, but the mace pummel is a bit of a heavy hitter. Wouldn't a sweet thing like you feel more comfortable using one of the smaller models at the bottom? No.
Selfie beamed. Taking her own initiative, she vaulted herself clean over the counter. The old man cried out, but she ignored him as she opened the case. The blue-handled nunchaku were right there. And she pulled them out with one hand despite the weight that the spiked metal would have made. The old man's jaw dropped slightly as she cuddled them. Like they were fluffy shikobos.
I'm going to call it the Morning Star. The what?
Zell made a face at her, standing with 2 pairs of gloves in each hand.
Why give a basher like that such a cute name? Because, the mace look like stars, don't they?
Selfie laughed, stroking the ends.
Maybe. If you squint.
Zell frowned at her as Selfie put her now old nunchaku on the counter along with payment for the Morning Star. She was cooing to it like a baby as she returned over the counter. It was kind of scary in a way. The old man started laughing.
Well, aren't you all a strange bunch? Ah, here we go. Young lady. Your sleighing tale. Fresh from the box and made with only the finest quality ingredients.
Quistis beamed as the old man took a box from the small window and brought it over to her. She pulled off the lid and her face lit up like he was giving her fine jewelry. The whip inside was much more beautiful and sleek than her last one, so he might as well have. She took the handle in her hand and smiled at the smooth feel of the leather grip.
Perfect. Ah, and it's got great weight. Oh, I'm going to enjoy this very much. Hey, old guy,
Zell came up to the counter.
These gloves here, what's the hide? Those are made with fish fins. And those ones, I believe, are dragon fins. Uncommon. And the metal? Ah, that's special. That one is made with web silk from caterpillars. The other is M-stone pieces. Both are very good. The dragon fin is more comfortable, but the caterpillar web is much better for leaving a good dent. Doesn't wear down like metal does. And provides a nice little cushion for the knuckles. That's just a bonus. I'll take them both,
Zell grinned.
And I want you to rip the web from these and the M-stone from these and switch them. I want dragon fin with caterpillar web.
The old man looked surprised for just a moment. Then he laughed.
What a great combination. All right, give them over. I'll make the new weapon at no extra charge. Hey, Gennaro. Got a patch job for you.
The old man passed the gloves back through the window before turning to them again. His eyes landed on Rinoa, the only one not to have upgraded or outright bought a new weapon.
And you, darling?
Squall set her blaster edge on the counter and the man came forward. He pushed up his tiny glasses as his hands moved over the body of the weapon. He pressed the release, letting the blade unfold from where it was tucked away. He made a sound in the back of his throat.
Latest blaster edge model with the standard pinwheel blade. Low power, but the homing magnetic technology means you'll never need lose your weapon. Great for beginners and those not wishing to get in close to do combat. Must say, rather boring in comparison to the others.
Rinoa felt her face flushing almost in shame. Squall didn't appear bothered.
She's having a problem with firing times. It's a bit too slow. It also leans too far left. She's having to overcompensate. The motor could use a bit of a tune-up. Make it fly faster, hit harder. And the pinwheel blade is already dulling from use. I'd say sharpen it, but I think I'd rather just buy a new blade with superior metal. I think I actually have something for this. Yes, here we are.
The old man reached under the counter and pulled out a box.
Top of the line for the Blaster Edge series. Only premium shooters even want this blade. It's a bit heavier, but it's got a great deal more striking power. The company doesn't make them better than this.
Squall lifted the lid from the box and Rinoa's mouth fell open at the gleaming, slightly blue, metallic blade with golden inlay. It was longer, sharper than the pinwheel. It had a pointed rather than circular design.
The fins give it stabilization,
the old man said as Squall lifted it from the box.
And that's a magic stone there in the center. Helps with accuracy. Don't know if you want it though. I wouldn't recommend this blade for those unused to combat.
She'll take it, Squall said over the man, setting it back down.
Now talk to me about the motor. Ah, yes. Well, the blaster edge has a well-known flaw in that the magnetic technology takes a while to disengage. Makes accurate shooting difficult. The left-leaning tendency might just be a fluke in the design. I should be able to tune it up. I want it better. Don't just tune it up.
The old man laughed.
I like you. All right, let's see what I can do.
Mumbling to himself, the old man opened the blaster open to poke about in the electronics. He was at it for a few minutes. While he was doing so, Irvine's gun came back. It was less elegant now, but he purred over it all the same. He didn't seem bothered by its physical appearance. He took his time loading it with his new ammo, like it was a lover rather than a weapon. Selfie was still cooing over her morning star. Rinoa thought it was probably more than just a seed thing.
Okay,
the old man nodded, coming up from the blaster.
I should be able to improve on the mag tech, as well as fix the left lean. For added power and stability though, I'm going to need a part I don't keep in stock. A sheer feather from a thrusty. If you want to go hunt one down. Selfie,
Squall called over his shoulder.
You still have those sheer feathers?
She pulled herself from loving her new weapon with some difficulty.
Oh, yeah. Here.
The old man was laughing as Squall passed over the feather. It didn't much look like a feather. It was long, stiff, and didn't have a feather vein. It did have a small tuft of bristles at the tip, but that was nearly as stiff as the rachis.
Ah, perfect,
the old man smiled.
Yes, this is a fine feather. Okay, I can have it ready while you wait. For the custom job though, it's going to cost. The blade, the upgrade, altogether I'm going to have to bump it up to 300 gil. 200,
Squall said.
And I'll give you 3 more sheer feathers for future use. Deal.
The old man grabbed onto the bargain with a laugh.
All right. Hey. Benero. Got another blaster to upgrade. Add the blade, I'll fix the motor. Squall, what are you doing?
Rinoa frowned.
I don't have 200 gil. It's fine. I'll pay for it. Wano. You can't pay for my weapon.
Squall pushed a few buttons on his PDA then looked up.
Too late. Already done. Squall. What? I'm pretty sure our contract doesn't force you to pay for me. That's too much. It's only 200 gil. I just gave away 6,000. It's fine. It is not fine,
Rinoa sighed, looking guilty. She didn't really understand. She couldn't imagine what it was that would make him want to spend that much money on her. She didn't know how he felt about it. She couldn't. His offer to teach her how to fight wasn't given in jest. He had meant it, and that meant he had taken her on as a responsibility. Like when upperclassmen would be put in charge of an underclassman during their first trip into the training center. It was his job to make sure that she learned and that she was okay. She didn't know how to upgrade her own weapon yet. She had never needed to. He couldn't expect her to know something she was inexperienced with. So upgrading her weapon came under his duties as a teacher until she could do it herself. Wounding himself to obtain her a GF was not dissimilar to an instructor picking one of the very low-level GFs for their students to learn with. Teaching her how to fight. Teaching her to care for her equipment, providing her with said equipment. He had taken over her as a responsibility, therefore it was his job to provide for her. Besides, 200 gil was nothing. The 300 gil was nothing too, but he was trying to demonstrate to her how to haggle. The importance of stripping monsters for parts. How to determine what a weapon needed in order to improve. Zell's gloves, repurposed and custom, came out first. Zell hastily traded out his current pair for the new ones. Then he started shadow boxing in the corner. The others were all admiring their new weapons as they waited. Rinoa had fallen silent at his side, which suited Squall fine. He didn't mind standing in silence. He was hoping she might be getting the others' enthusiasm for weapons. She would need to do this herself the next time she upgraded. Their weapons came out at the same time. The Blaster Edge's new blade had been shined and buffed before installation. Squall's gun had been completely replaced. The new revolver was slightly bigger, darker, and extended further down the hilt. The hilt had been changed out for a different material, but the craftsman in the back had transferred Squall's keychain over to the new one. Rinoa's blaster's motor was unchanged, but the straps had been swapped out and a new girdle had been added at the end to wrap around her hand to prevent it from sliding. Rinoa slid on the improved weapon and smiled at the new girdle. It made holding the weapon easier despite the fact that the blade was now heavier. Squall was inspecting the new gun. His blade remained unchanged, only the gun half had been affected by the upgrade. Now bigger, it was also slightly heavier. However, the new gun would be able to discharge armor-piercing rounds, which, according to the guard's information, he would need against heavily defensive monsters in the tomb. Rinoa pressed the concealment button and the edge sunk in on itself and folded out of the way, like it had never even been there. Rinoa was thoroughly impressed.
"Thank you, Squall,"
Rinoa said, smiling at him as she touched the weapon.
"I love it."
Squall nodded to her once before stowing his gun blade back in his inventory. Rinoa, however, couldn't stop touching the new blaster. She couldn't wait to get to use it.
"Your blade model is called the Valkyrie,"
the old man said.
"And, young man, yours is called Sheer Trigger,"
Squall cut him off easily.
"Thank you. Rinoa, let's go. I want to stop by the item shop as well before we get going."
The others were talking happily, like normal teenagers, as they left the store. It was the first time Rinoa had ever seen them being so normal. Sure, it was about weapon upgrades, but the reaction to something new was normal anyway.
"So, Squall,"
Zell called up to him as they walked through the busy streets.
"You wanna rent a car to get to the tomb? I don't know if they rent out ones that can fit all 6 of us." "All 6 of us aren't going,"
Squall said.
"I'm only taking 2 of you." "What? Why?"
Rinoa frowned at him.
"It's excessive for more than that to go fetch a code number. Selfie, you especially. I want to stay here in Deling City." "Hey, me."
She pointed to herself.
"Yes. I want you to gather information. I want to know as much as possible about the goings-on in the government. What the people know about the sorceress. Anything you can find out." "Yes, Captain."
She saluted him.
"Stop calling me that. I'm going to go to the tomb and I'm bringing me."
Rinoa grabbed his arm quickly. She didn't realize how strange a move that was until everyone was looking at her.
I want to go.
Squall raised an eyebrow at her. Not quite asking why, but clearly curious. She cleared her throat self-consciously, releasing his jacket and carefully smoothing down the leather she had bunched up.
I want to practice fighting some more. And I want to test out my new blade. I'm not going to get fighting practice in the city.
She looked up at Squall from under her lashes. The lie sounded hollow to her own ears. She could only imagine how stiff it was to them. They were smart, there was no way they wouldn't realize that she was lying. But she really didn't want to stay here. Squall nodded once.
All right. It will be a good chance for you to fight different types of monsters. Irvine, you're also coming with us. Hey, me.
Irvine blinked.
Why? Because I want to see how you fight. I don't know how you'll react in a combat situation, and if I'm going to be fighting with you, I want to learn how on a relatively easy assignment. Selfie, you and Instructor Treep find information. Zell. Yes. I want a layout of the city. In case we need to fight our way out afterwards. I want more than a map, I want you to be familiar with every twist and turn. Got it.
Zell jumped to attention.
It's pretty late and I don't know how long we'll take at the tomb. We shouldn't take longer than a few hours though. We'll meet up at the hotel tomorrow around noon before going to the general's house. If we're not there, feel free to come looking. Move out.
Selfie and Quistis turned and ran one way. Zell ran another. Irving winked at Rinoa. Squall gave him a dry look before turning to her.
Know where we can rent a car?
She nodded.
There's a place that way.
There was no road leading to the tomb of the unknown king. It was, however, a long stretch of flat land. They only needed a car that wouldn't mind going off-road. Rinoa shouldn't have been surprised that Squall knew how to drive. Somehow, she was.
This one of those various skill seats need?
She asked as she settled into the passenger seat next to him. Irvine was forced to sit the back.
Absolutely,
Squall said before throwing it in drive. He was fast, but skilled. The bumpy road didn't bother him. He kept such slick control over the vehicle that Rinoa was certain she had borne rougher rides of paved streets. By the time they reached the tomb, it was far too late to go in. Squall insisted on sleeping outside, on the old, broken cobblestone path that led to the entrance.
I'll take first watch,
he said as Rinoa struggled to light the campfire. He wasn't helping her this time, he was making her do it on her own.
Irvine, you've got second watch. Rinoa, third. Wami.
She squeaked, losing control over the fire starter. Grumbling, she picked it up out of the thatch she was having trouble trying to light.
Squall, I don't know. I don't think you should be giving me such an important task. I mean, what if we get attacked? Then you wake us up. Same thing I would do if I was on watch. Keep lighting the fire. But what if I mess up?
She said, nearly wringing her hands.
Then we're going to get eaten or hurt by a monster.
He was merciless. And she groaned at the thought of that sort of blame being on her head. Irvine gave her a strange look as she went back to trying to light the fire.
You're not. Seed. Are you?
Rinoa jumped and Squall rolled his eyes under his lids.
Well. No,
she admitted, trying to light the thatch again.
I'm his employer. Then what are you doing here?
Irvine frowned at her.
Did you at least attend a garden? Well. No. Hey, what's with this? Why is she even here then? Our contract is none of your business,
Squall told him, leaving no room for questions.
You're not Seed either, Irvine, I'll remind you. Yeah, but I'm at least garden trained. She can't even light a campfire. I don't think she should be put on watch either. No offense, cutie, but I'm not willing to take that chance.
Rinoa flinched, but she couldn't exactly complain. It wasn't like it wasn't true.
She'll be fine,
Squall said, as though supremely confident.
I've seen her fight. I've never seen you fight, I've never trained you before. Of the two of you, you're the one I'm most concerned trusting on watch, Kineas. Now, if I were you, I would get to sleep. Second watch is the worst one. Rinoa, try to cover the thatch from the wind before lighting it. Oh, Hein,
Rinoa cursed before moving her body to cover the tiny would-be fire. Looking uncertain, Irvine leaned back as instructed. He pulled his hat down to cover his eyes so the light of the fire wouldn't bother him. Squall sat back, watching as Rinoa struggled. He made no offer to help. Not that she expected one. And when she finally succeeded, the thrill of victory was that much sweeter for achieving it on her own.
Oh, yeah,
she nodded to herself as she and Squall fed the growing flame.
That's how we do it. Well done,
Squall said in monotone. She didn't know if he meant it or not, but she was going to assume that he did and refused to let it dampen her spirits.
I can't believe that stupid man is making us come all the way out here for something like this,
she said, glaring over at the dark temple. She could hear water moving from behind it, could see winking moonlight from the small stream under the bridge.
It's ridiculous. He's just doing his job,
Squall shrugged, uncaring.
I'm not talking about the guard. I meant the general. Who does he think he is? Sending you out on a stupid thing like this to prove yourself. You're Seed. Proof enough, right? Not for everyone. Some still want our skills to be tested to determine that we're good enough. He just wants to make sure he's getting everything he's paying for. No, he wants to flaunt his power. You're Seed. You've pushed yourself harder than most anyone to earn that title. Everyone knows what Balam puts the Seed candidates through. Even if only half of it's true, his own soldiers are pathetic in comparison. I'm sure it's over-exaggerated. It always is,
he said calmly, poking the fire.
I mean, yeah,
Rinoa laughed.
Those rumors about things like torture training are just ridiculous. Torture training? That's funny. Right? There's no way they would actually torture you as a lesson. Of course not. It was more like a weekend seminar kind of thing. Wait. What?
Rinoa's big eyes turned to him in shock.
Are you telling me there was torture training? Seminar,
Squall corrected.
And you got a full week off afterwards to recover. What?
Rinoa's voice ripped through 2 octaves.
That doesn't make it better. What are you upset about? I thought you already knew. I didn't think it was true.
She shook her head, trying to wrap her mind around a place willingly torturing its students.
How is that even remotely okay? I told you before. Seeds choose this path. We make the choice knowing that the seminar is a required credit. And it wasn't even real torture anyway. We had a safe word we could say if it was going too far. And there was nothing life-threatening. It was all very controlled. A safe word,
Rinoa repeated numbly.
Mine was flowers.
He gave her a wry grin.
It had to be something simple, easy to understand, and unforgettable in cases of extreme pain. I thought seed, flowers. Who could forget that?
Squall,
you say that like it's completely normal,
she told him, shaking her head.
Why in the world would anyone want to put themselves through something like that? Because you can't understand torture until you've been subjected to it. And wouldn't you rather know ahead of time what might happen in a controlled environment? The likelihood of a seed being tortured is very low anyway. It is?
She asked, smiling hopefully.
Of course. We're not sources of information, which is what torture is predominantly used for. Most seeds that are captured are usually just killed outright. What?
Rinoa balked.
Squall. Of course, the enemy would try to buy us first. However, a contract is firm, and we don't change sides just because one offers more. So you don't have to worry about Galbadia being able to buy me away from you despite their superior funds. Okay, was not even close to worried about that. I'm more worried about the fact that I now know that you would prefer to die rather than just turn on me to save your own life. You would prefer betrayal. Well, no. But I would prefer you not throw your life away. It's part of the job,
he shrugged. Rinoa said back on her legs, letting out a long breath. She wanted to be able to argue with him more, to try to convince him how crazy his words were. But the look on his face was completely closed off. He knew all of her arguments, he had already weighed and gone over them in his own head. This price was one he accepted he might need to pay at any time. Rinoa just didn't understand. What could drive a person to this?
Squall. Don't you have anything to live for?
He blinked, his stormy grey eyes focusing over on her. The look of confusion within them told Rinoa all that she needed to know.
What are you talking about? Don't you have a family? No.
Rinoa's face fell with her heart at the look on Squall's face. It wasn't sad, or even bothered. It was like she had asked him if he had ever sprouted wings and flown before. Of course not. What a silly question. Why would she even bother asking something like that? And that's what broke her heart.
Squall. What's that?
Rinoa felt her body tighten in anticipation of a battle. But when she turned, it wasn't a monster that Squall was staring at. Just behind one of the crumbling columns a light was dancing. Flowing. Almost shimmering in the glow of the moonlight.
What is that?
Rinoa asked, drawing back slightly. She didn't know either, but just assuming it was bad seemed like a safe bet. Squall was already up, moving towards the lights. Because he was going first, Rinoa stood and followed after him. The two of them came around the side of the column. A long sigh of delight came from Rinoa at the sight of the firefly-like, pink lights coming from a crack in the ground.
What's that?
She asked, wanting to touch it. Fearing to do so.
It's raw magic,
Squall said, kneeling before it.
Magic runs all throughout the inside of the planet. And, sometimes, it can come up from below in fountains like this. Didn't you learn that in school? Well, yeah, but I've never seen one before.
She kneeled down next to him. The lights almost felt like the tiniest of breezes on her skin.
What kind of magic is it? Only one way to find out. Take it. What? Me? Yes. Take it. See if Diablos wants to keep it. If not, you can put it in a capsule. How? Just reach out and take it.
Trusting him, Rinoa lifted her hand and moved towards the light. She didn't even need to try to draw it up. Diablos absorbed it through her arm without her needing to do anything to assist him. The lights, swirling independently before, just zoomed towards her. It only took a moment. Then the light was gone and she could feel Diablos sorting through the new gained power in her mind.
So?
Squall looked at her.
What's the spell?
Rinoa closed her eyes, listening to Diablos as he adjusted to the new power. Judging it to see if he was willing to use whatever it was.
Flow? No, float.
Her eyes snapped back open with a laugh.
It's a float spell.
Squall nodded and stood. Rinoa followed after him, grinning.
He said he's happy to use float. Even though, technically, floating is defying gravity. He could just think of it as loosening gravity to the point where you are no longer stuck to the earth. He says he doesn't like your sass,
Rinoa laughed.
You know, it's kind of nice having him there now that I've gotten used to it. Even if the nightmares are weird if I forget to take him out.
Squall nodded, agreeing to all of the statements before leading Rinoa back to the campfire. Irvine was already asleep. Squall took a seat across the fire from him. Rinoa sat beside Squall, wrapping her arms around her knees. The constant swirling of cool air around his body was in direct contrast to the heat of the flames. It didn't escape Rinoa's notice that Squall tended to stay further from the fire than the others.
Does the cold bother you?
She couldn't help but ask.
No. Not when I have Shiva. Just one of the benefits of having her as a GF. So is cold not dangerous to you anymore, or do you just not feel it? Sort of a combination of the two. I spent a winter night outside when I first got her to test her. I was technically hypothermic in the morning, but I was fine otherwise. If I had unjunctioned her before warming up again, I would have been in trouble, but so long as we were connected, the lower temperature was completely natural to me.
Rinoa made a thoughtful sound as she ran that over in her head.
Diablos doesn't have temperature control. But, sometimes, I feel like he's making my weapon lighter to wield. It's possible. He is the master of gravity and time. You get his benefits as his master.
Rinoa smiled.
I wonder if I could fall off a cliff without getting hurt. Let's not test that theory. Oh, so you can spend all night out in the snow, but I can't jump off of one measly cliff. No. Start with a small ledge and work your way up. I could return inside at any time when I was out in the snow. You can't unjump from a cliff.
Rinoa started laughing and Squall gave her a look.
I'm sorry. It's just, you're so very serious.
And was that wrong? Why was she laughing at him? Was it somehow wrong to be serious? He just didn't want her trying to jump from cliffs. How did he know she wasn't serious?
You should get to sleep,
Squall told her, rather than follow that line of thought.
You have your own watch tonight. Oh, right.
That sobered her up.
I still don't know. Squall, that's a lot of responsibility. I'm not a seed. What if I mess it up? Didn't you come out here to train?
He asked dully. She flinched, because they both knew very well she had been lying. At this point though, all she could do was nod along.
Then it starts with watch. Trust me, the hardest part is staying awake.
Rinoa giggled. Just slightly. But she giggled. She actually responded to his joke. That was twice in a row now. He watched as she moved just slightly away from him, closer to the warmth of the fire. He pretended not to continue watching her out of the corner of his eye while she fell asleep. End of chapter.